to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Owens here with Johnny Sobchak for another wonderful episode. We're talking Thor, Love and Thunder today, breaking down the news of the week. It's going to be a great one. Johnny, how are you?
Doing all right, Zach. Thanks. How are you doing?
I am great. It is officially wedding week. That means that on top of me getting married, the Inside the Film Room co-hosts will be united in person later this week. What a time to be alive. Should we do a live podcast recording at the wedding reception? I think so.
That would be certainly fun. It's gonna be very cool. I'm very excited to be reunited. It's weird because we talk and interact so much on a daily basis, and we do these podcasts, of course, and whatnot. But I mean,
I haven't seen you since the Film Fest 919
October,
when
right?
we briefly saw each other.
Yeah,
like heading into opposite theaters.
So that was October of last year, and then prior to that, hadn't seen you since 2019, maybe. Like it's very strange, but I'm just so excited to be there, and I'm very excited for you, and it's gonna be a good time.
It's gonna be a blast, and we've also got former co-host Jake Lawler coming in. He'll be there, so it's gonna be a full house of Inside the Film Room talent there. So super excited. But that's and of course, as I look through my office door here, that my lovely bride to be, who was a co-host of one episode of Inside the Film Room, she wanted to make sure that she gets her recognition as well as being part of the Inside the Film Room family.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Of course.
Goes without saying, almost.
Exactly. But yeah, that's pretty much everything going on in my world. We got a couple movies to talk about, a couple shows that are watching, but what's going on with you, Johnny?
Yeah, it's been pretty chill. Nothing too crazy happening over here. When did we record the last episode? Was that Monday? It's been like less than a week.
It was July 4th. So that was last Monday. So not a ton in the news world to discuss, or not a lot of time to really watch a ton. I don't know what you've been up to, but I have seen a couple things.
Yeah. And I haven't watched much outside of the main things we're going to be talking about. I did just, as we were pulling up the podcast to record, I did finish Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. It's a Peter Weir film from 2003. People may not be familiar with Weir. He is also the director of The Truman Show, Dead Poets Society, Witness, Picnic at Hanging Rock. He's a very well-regarded, kind of a legend in a lot of ways. And he actually was just announced as getting an honorary Oscar, I think, which is very cool. But Master and Commander was kind of coming off the hype of Gladiator and Russell Crowe, like early 2000s hype and prestige. And it's a really interesting, historical epic. I've heard other people say that it's the best modern, quote unquote, modern Star Trek movie, because it pretty much almost entirely takes place on a ship. And it's not like a big epic like event or a battle that it's recounting. It's just the experience of this ship and its crew and its captain over the course of this particular mission they're on. So and it's kind of breezy, like it's not very long. It's under 2.5 hours, and which for epics is usually on the longer side. So I quite enjoyed it. It was a very it's interesting to look back at these movies. I mean, this one's almost 20 years old now, and having just seen Russell Crowe in Love and Thunder, Just seeing him kind of in his prime. And I haven't seen a lot of Russell Crowe movies, I'll say. The Nice Guys, of course, Gladiator. But I do.
Les
I do like.
Mis. Have you seen Les Mis?
I I don't think I have like properly. I've seen LA Confidential, so I've seen that. That's another like kind of classic around that time, late 90s. Man of Steel, obviously his DC stuff, but this was like I said, really prime. And if it weren't for Return of the King coming out in 2003, I think this won 2 Oscars, and I think it probably could have won even more had it not been for the biggest sweep of all time. But it is it's underrated. It didn't do like exceedingly well at the box office. It wasn't a Gladiator size hit, but it did decently. But if you haven't seen it, I had not seen it until just recently, obviously. I definitely recommend it. It's on HBO Max right now, and it's a fun, just kind of swashbuckling like action adventure that's like still like fairly like historically accurate and not too like outlandish. So definitely worthwhile.
I remember seeing I remember this movie. I have not seen it, but I remember it from like my childhood in 2003 when it came out, and like wanting to see it because it was kind of, like you said, the like swashbuckling like epicness of it. Like 2003 obviously is prime Pirates of the Caribbean time right there.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know, as a child, I was like in my ocean faring stage. So I was like, yes, this one's next, but I never ended up seeing it. So maybe I'll finally circle back to it.
Yeah,
but
you dig it.
That's one that I'll have to add to the list here. But on my end, I took your advice, straight off the bat. We wrapped last week's episode, and after hearing that Cha Cha Real Smooth had made it into your favorites of the year so far, cranked it on, and my God, I love it so much. That movie, it was so like, oh, it was so perfect to me. It was so like light, feel good, rom-com, like very easy to like root for the characters. You love them. It just made me so happy. And I was like, I'm a mark for this movie. And it definitely hit the spot. Rebecca watched it with me and really enjoyed it as well. So thank you for finally convincing me to turn that on. But really, really loved Cha Cha Real Smooth. And then obviously saw Thor 4. And then just last night, I watched the very first Mission Impossible. So now that puts me at having seen all of them, but Mission Impossible 2. My relationship with these movies is kind of weird because I came in, Mission Impossible 3 was the first one that I saw, which like, I feel like in general, like you can maybe not like with these more recent ones, but like you could kind of just like, I picked up with Mission Impossible 3 and like didn't have a ton of like, they initially were like different villains each time. Yeah. And it was kind of like, you could jump in at 3 and not have to know 1 or 2. I've been fine not having seen 1 or 2 up until this point, but then so I just watched 3 and then onward from Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation and Fallout. But good to go back and watch it from the start, see how it all started. And I will say that these movies have come a very long way, because not only in like the like the effects and everything of like going from 1996 to now, but like just the scale and the like goals of these movies now, like that was very straightforward. I mean, there's like some twists there, but it was like your pretty standard like spy movie versus like what we got with Fallout being like one of the best action movies of all time. I'm glad to see the progression here. So I guess I'll have to check out Mission Impossible 2 at some point before Dead Reckoning.
I'm a huge, I'm an even bigger Mission fan than you are, I would say. And I still have never seen 2. And the reason is because I do like,
I've heard it's not very good, but I'm like, at this point, I might as well just check it off the list to have the full franchise.
Yeah, it definitely is like the black sheep of the family, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I do enjoy the original for what it is. It is like very much a very 90s spy like thriller movie. It's not an action spectacle. It's not cutting edge effects or anything like that. I mean, there are some very interesting, like well done things in that movie as far as like tension and elements of that nature. But it does kind of, again, haven't seen 2, but what I hear is that it just kind of goes off a cliff in that one. And then
not the way that Tom Cruise currently goes off a cliff in the trailer on a motorcycle.
No, no, unfortunately not. And then and that's interesting too. The interesting thing about this franchise is like the longevity of it. You know, it these movies are fairly spread out like over time.
Right. That's what I was looking at. I know the first one was 96 and the third one was 2006. So somewhere in between was two. So it's not like they're like cranking them out every year, you
No,
know?
so there was a 6 year layoff after the second one. And it was J.J. Abrams and getting him involved where they were like, okay, we need you to reboot, basically kind of do like a soft reboot.
That's why I was able to jump back in straight with three, I imagine,
Yeah.
having that soft reboot.
Yeah, it's so just gets you into the characters again and gets Tom Cruise, like Ethan Hunt, off on like a new path and some new crew members and things like that. Introduces Simon Pegg, who's been like a staple since then. So I think that was definitely a smart move. Then obviously since the third one, and the third one is a good movie. I don't think it's as great as the last three, but it is good, and it was a solid solid kind of reset. But yeah, since then, I mean, with what Brad Bird did with Ghost Protocol, and then McQuarrie on Rogue Nation and Fallout, it's just it keeps going up, and I suspect it will continue to go up based on the teaser we've seen for next year's like mission. So
as do I will probably just watch two. Hopefully I'll go through them all just to lead up and tide me over until the next one, because I know, at least for me, it's kind of, I probably have seen them all like the first time. I know I've seen Fallout multiple times, but the others I've probably only seen maybe once. I've seen the third one a couple of times probably. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that it'll be a good refresher here to hold me over until the first part of Dead Reckoning.
Yeah, no doubt. I definitely plan on doing a little marathon leading up to it.
But on the TV side, I know I mentioned last week Loot and Miss Marvel, still cranking with both of those. And I started The Boys. I know you were just finishing, it just wrapped season 3. You and Jake and Connor, I believe, were talking about the season 3 finale, but I am 2 or 3 episodes deep in season 1. So just now getting started in this Vought universe here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I'm into it. I think I haven't been fully hooked yet, but I'm definitely interested and gonna keep watching here.
I don't know how I didn't know that you didn't see The Boys before. I especially don't know how I got onto that before you did. But it's damn good. It is a great show. It's one of the best superhero things, period, that's come out over the last few years. So the more you maybe you're not necessarily like totally hooked yet, but the deeper you get into it and the more complex things get, I think it just excels and kind of builds. So
it was one of those that I watched the first episode a long time ago, like not when it first came out, but like probably like after the first season wrapped. I watched that episode and then just like something happened and I didn't continue with it, but I'm convinced that I want to be able to be in the discussion once season 4 rolls around. So I'm going to stick with it this time.
Absolutely. Got to.
Well, shall we get into some of the news of our short little week that we're going to cover here?
Let's do it.
First up, talking some teasers and trailers and teasers for trailers, because that's what we do now. The new Lord of the Rings show coming to Amazon, Rings of Power. We have a teaser. It started off as a 15-second teaser for the teaser. So it was a 15-second teaser that directed you to Amazon to watch the full minute-long teaser, which is a teaser for the full trailer coming July 14th. So a lot of teasing for this trailer.
Wow.
I don't know. I just watched the minute-long trailer, or I guess the minute-long teaser, and for me, I mean, I'm indifferent toward this series. We know my thoughts on Lord of the Rings as a whole, but I'll definitely watch this just because it's going to be the thing. It's going to be compared to Game of Thrones. We'll see what happens there, especially since it's going to be like competing with House of the Dragon, I'd imagine, with that coming out in August. But I'll defer to you as the resident Lord of the Rings fan. I know we've talked about this show in general. This new teaser, have you do you even care to watch it at this point, or are you just ready for the show? What's the status here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing new stuff and getting a better idea of the story. Because, like, even going back to the Super Bowl spot we got, it was pretty light on details or character or plot, which is fine. I mean, it did its job. It got people talking, and it didn't spoil anything. But I am definitely and I always forget that you don't really care about Lord of the Rings, which just blows my mind. But I am looking forward to seeing what they do with this show. I'm more excited for House of the Dragon just because I trust HBO and like the showrunner on House of the Dragon a little bit more, and I like what I've seen from that show a little bit more so far. But I'm still, cautiously optimistic about this series, and I think getting a better feel of the tone of the show and what we're going to be dealing with as far as characters and the story, I think is going to be a good thing, and hopefully we'll get more people excited. So it is going to be interesting because they do come out, the actual series themselves start around the same time, and I suspect we'll be running like concurrently at least part of the time. So the dialogue and the conversation between those two, comparing and contrasting, will be interesting. Hopefully not too toxic and fandom driven, but I'm excited. But I definitely it was odd though, I will say, like the teaser, they had like teasers building up to this teaser, and then they said, oh, teaser in a couple of weeks or like next week.
Yeah.
So that was odd, but I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully, like I said, it doesn't spoil too much or give too much away, but I do want to see a little bit more, and hopefully it's good things.
Well, I will say this 1 minute teaser does not spoil anything. It's I think there's maybe like 2 lines of dialogue in it the whole time. So at least that one's not giving anything away. We'll see what happens July 14th. But pulling up the timeline here, it is interesting. So House of the Dragon is going to be, as HBO does with Game of Thrones, Sunday episodes starting August 21st, and then Rings of Power begins on Friday, September 2nd. So we'll get 2 episodes down of House of the Dragon, and then when we're getting the 3rd episode of House of Dragon, it'll also have an episode of Rings of Power. So we'll have like Friday fantasy and then Sunday night fantasy with both of these series. So I feel like whether, I know it's like you said, it's always going to be fan bases going back and forth competing and stuff, but for someone who is just like a fan of fantasy and this storytelling, if you can appreciate both, then what a time to be alive, having a busy weekend like that. So we'll see where everybody falls on both of these, but I'm with you as far as right now. I'm definitely more excited for House of the Dragon.
Yeah, 100%.
Moving on to a real trailer here. This is the first trailer for The Woman King, releasing September 16th in theaters. This is the historical epic starring Viola Davis, inspired by the true events that happened in the Kingdom of Dahomey, one of the most powerful states of Africa in the 18th and 19th centuries. Very badass trailer here. This is the first look. We'd heard a lot about it as far as Viola Davis playing this fierce warrior who leads up an army of women in this tribe to defend the tribe from European invaders. But Viola Davis, Lashana Lynch, John Boyega, and the cast here. What were your initial impressions from this movie?
Yeah, so the trailer, I watched it like once and went back and watched it a little bit more. Obviously, this is one that people have been keeping their eye on for a while. Viola Davis, huge name, a big lead role, kind of an action role for her, I suppose. And also knowing like the supporting cast, pretty impressive as well. Particularly John Boyega was a big focal point of the trailer. Lashana Lynch got a cool moment in there as well. And the costumes, I mean, the designs, the set of it all looks very good. Looks like they actually put some good money into this project. As far as the overall feel of it, I'm curious to see. I mean, it has a September release date, so it doesn't really seem like they're aiming for a sort of like big awards push. Like, it doesn't sound like it's going to be going to like any festivals or anything like that, which is kind of interesting because I feel like it would have that potential. But at the same time, if they're not, if it is going to get that kind of maybe more questionable date, like I'm wondering, like, what does the studio think about it? Like, what's going on with that? Like, how well are they? Like, where's the marketing going to go from here? I suppose. So I'm not like overly excited about this. I do think it is cool to see this type of film, like this type of story, just because it's not something we've really seen before. I mean, the closest comparison that I can think of, and I'm sure I'm missing plenty of others, but obviously Black Panther is like the thing that comes to mind when we're talking about like big pop culture reference to a like African kingdom or like African like I guess thinking about like the culture, the costumes, the designs, all those
right, the scale of the production design,
the battles, the combat, and of course that is entirely fictional, where this is, you know, completely based on true events. So that's the big difference, and I think that is cool to see that story being told. I'm just curious about how, like, the narrative of this, like how it's going to go, if it's going to do something that like we really like haven't seen before as far as the storytelling elements of it go, because I feel like there is something really interesting about a predominantly you know, female military unit, and obviously they're facing off against like colonists and imperialists, and you know, the political and like social like messaging that could be part of this. I'm just curious how much they're going to go into that, or is that going to be more like surface level, which I think would be disappointing if it goes there out. And I will say, Gina Prince Bythewood, who is the director of this, I haven't seen much of her work, unfortunately. I do like need to watch more of her films. The only one that I've seen is The Old Guard, which was
I was getting ready to bring this up as soon as you gave me an opening, but I know we had very differing opinions on that movie.
Yeah.
But one thing I think we can agree on, at least, is that like it was very brutalist in the action. Like the action was violent and gritty, and like, this is throwing it back to 2 years ago on a podcast, but if I remember correctly, you didn't care for the story as much, but the action and the stunts and stuff were still cool, and we have both agreed on that. So if they're at least they can translate that aspect, then, and it looks like they are, as far as what we've seen in the trailer here for The Woman King. Like, I think we're good in that department, if the Old Guard is any indicator.
Yeah, I think it's just, yeah, Old Guard, again, not a fan of that movie. So that's like, I think maybe that's the biggest reason that's keeping my like expectations tempered. But I'm definitely keeping this on my radar. And I know people, like I said, have been talking about Viola Davis, like Oscar potential, like, you know, at least the costumes could potentially be in the mix as well, because they're doing some very, very cool things there. I have no idea if this is going to be something people are going to be talking about like at that time or not. I'm like, you know, obviously I'm going to be doing some writing and stuff about that later on, but you know, this, I think we'll have to see more and see how this goes. But you know, I thought the trailer was done well, and I think people got people talking, got eyes on it. So I mean, that's the number one thing that they need to do.
I am with you there. I am excited for this. Like what I saw so far. So we'll keep an eye on that, releasing September 16th. So not too far away at this point. But next up on the docket here, some casting news. Very exciting for the both of us, especially for you. I know you've been as the sci-fi expert here on the podcast, but Steven Yeun joins the cast of Bong Joon Ho's adaptation of Mickey 7. Still no name yet, but based on the book Mickey 7, which I am currently reading, so I can give a little insight there potentially. But this is, of course, Bong's work with Robert Pattinson is in a starring role here. So to get Steven Yeun joining that cast already is thrilling. That's a very easy way to put it.
Yeah, I am so unbelievably stoked for this. Like, this is easily one of my most anticipated films of anything that's announced or is being, you know, developed. Bong coming off of his Oscar sweep, essentially, you know, back in 2020, and this was being his follow-up film. The fact that he's working with Warner Brothers, and Robert Pattinson is in the lead role, playing at least two different kind of characters. He's gonna be playing multiple incarnations of Mickey, it sounds like. And then so that enough, it's a sci-fi concept, and it's going to be a big kind of pretty large budget sci-fi project, it sounds like. And then you have the talents of folks like Toni Collette, who I am a huge fan of. Mark Ruffalo, of course, also great. Now Steven Yeun in the picture.
Naomi Ackie as well.
Naomi Aki playing the love interest, and I believe like a pilot character from the book.
Yep.
I am just like I could not be more excited. Like, and also in addition to this, some other bits and pieces of news that have come out in the last few weeks. Darius Kanji, Oscar-nominated cinematographer, doing the cinematography. He also did Uncut Gems. He did Bong's Okja from a few years back. So and I'm really looking forward to that. And then also we have production designer Fiona Crombie. She's also Oscar nominated. She's doing this film. So all the pieces are coming into play, and I suspect we're going to get even more impressive names and other talent coming up as this gears to film. I believe it's starting production or filming next month, most likely. And that'll run through the end of the year over in London at the same studios where they did the Batman at Leavesden. So I'm just very, very excited, and I have no idea when this is going to come out. I would suspect, since it's not going to be done filming till December, that it would at the earliest be like a late 2023 film. But Warner Brothers is already stacked for next year, so I'm guessing maybe that it's something that they would hold off until 2024, which is a ways away, unfortunately. But lots of other exciting things to keep us sated in the meantime. But I'm really, everything about this was already on that level for me as far as excitement, and now Stephen Yeun, who's just a fantastic actor and someone I'm a really big fan of, and he's been making great project choices over the last few years, is now part of the picture as well. I think that just the cast and getting those names attached bodes well, hopefully, for its chance at success and being not only received well, obviously, as we would expect with Bong, but commercially, getting people in the theater and marketing.
I was gonna say, with so many, the way that Parasite blew up and so many people coming to see a movie that was in Korean, that was not necessarily your stereotypical blockbuster in the US, to see it blow up, win awards, win Best Picture, and then obviously like pandemic happened, everything, like Bong kind of like went back into hibernation. Now he's coming out swinging with this, and to have Robert Pattinson, who's one of the biggest stars, and to just like you said, rack up this A-list cast here. I'm excited to see this kind of come out as a blockbuster that people outside of just like movie buffs, movie fans, people who have seen Okja and who have seen Memories of Murder and Snowpiercer, all of those movies, like to see the general public be very excited for this after having gotten a taste with Parasite. I'm excited for just that aura around this movie.
Totally. I think that's going to be very cool and interesting to see. As you point out, that was such a cultural moment and like a shift in some ways, even though it was kind of an relatively isolated, like extraordinary circumstance. I do hope and I trust that they will very much lean into Bong's name and his pedigree and the name recognition around Parasite and things like that when it comes to the marketing and just building this up as something like an event and something that people will see. And also, hey, it doesn't hurt that Batman is playing the lead role.
Right.
And then you have other very recognizable, popular folks like Mark Ruffalo, obviously, in the MCU, and Stephen Yeun from obviously a lot of people remember him starting off in The Walking Dead, but he's in other bigger projects now as well. So it's going to be
him in a couple weeks in Nope.
In Nope, yep, Jordan Peele's next film. So very, very exciting. And I know you're reading it currently, which is very cool. And I am torn. I always feel this way when it comes up to projects that I'm looking forward to for films. Like, do I read the source material? Do I wait and see what it's like and then maybe go back and read it? Or do I always have this issue, but it sounds like from what you've said so far, it sounds like it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm very into it. So I'm probably like 7 or 8 chapters in. So I'm not like, maybe about 100 pages, but it's not like, it's only maybe like 250, 270 pages. It's not like a Dune or something that is super dense. And this book, like the movie was announced before the book even released, I believe. The book just released earlier this year. But I'm excited because it's very approachable. Comparing it to something like a Dune, where you're fighting for your life those first couple chapters as you're flipping back to the glossary and learning all of this language. But in this case, it's like very much, it's not like on Earth or anything, but there is like, it is human people and this is what's happening, and the terminology is, there is no glossary. It's all straightforward, and like everything is laid out for you pretty straightforward. There's obviously like the sci-fi elements and like moving throughout the galaxy and all of this, but it's like it is sci-fi, but it's not like I'm trying to find the right word. It's not like I don't even know, but it's just I already said approachable, so I was trying not to say that again, but it is very welcoming sci-fi, it seems like, from what I've got so far. There isn't anything that's going to like turn off someone who may not be like a diehard fan.
Is it and this will probably be my last question, just getting a feel for it, because I feel like I have gotten this feel from what I've heard and read so far, and I feel like this would be a good comparison or a good way to try and market and like maybe get this film across. Of course, Bong's going to put his own spin on it, and probably the source material, I feel like he's probably going to change some things, I would suspect. But would you say maybe it's comparable to like The Martian at all, as far as like? Yeah,
I mean, Martian is obviously like Earth-based and realistic, like still has those ties, but it is in the same sense of like this could happen kind of. I mean, this is much more, this is like set much further down the line in the future, and it's like they've left Earth, they've gone to another planet, they're leaving there, but it's like a logical sort of, it's not like Star Wars where you're suddenly like dropped into a world with lightsabers and magic powers and stuff.
Okay. Hey, works for me.
I'll keep you posted as I get further through the book, but no spoilers. I can't ruin the experience for you. So moving on, last piece of news here, just a quick hitter before we transition full on into the MCU. Captain America 4 finds its director in Julius Ona, who previously has directed the Cloverfield Paradox, and Luce. I don't know how to say that. I never saw the movie, but it's the Kelvin Harrison movie.
I think. Yeah.
Luce. Okay. Cloverfield Paradox and Luce. I know Jake loves Luce.
Yeah.
Cloverfield Paradox, on the other hand, that was the surprise drop on Netflix, right?
Yes, it was.
That did not,
not go over well.
Did not go over well. So mixed reviews, we'll say.
Mixed reviews. Let's just mixed reviews.
I know Marvel is returning to Comic-Con later this month, so could get more info there. I know we're going. What's his name? Is it Malcolm Spellman? Is that the showrunner from? It is the showrunner from Falcon and the Winter Soldier who is writing this, I believe. So.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yes, he's writing the screenplay for this movie. So continuing, obviously, in that show, Falcon takes over as the new Cap. So same writer will be continuing on this story for Anthony Mackie's character as he transitions fully into Captain America. I don't have many thoughts on this, having not seen Cloverfield Paradox or Luce, other than what I know about those movies. So I don't need to spend much time discussing this unless you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, great get for Ona. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a big responsibility. It's a big project. It's going to be, I'm sure, very large in scale, scope, potentially expensive. Very much a jump from anything he's done previously, even including Cloverfield Paradox, which still had a decent budget, I'm sure, and was a pretty big Netflix original. But Luce, which came out since Paradox, I believe, that is it's a very small, drama. So hopefully you can bring those talents and those kind of more nuanced elements to the performance and like maybe the storytelling in Captain America 4. That would certainly be a relief from kind of what we've seen in more recent Marvel movies, where it hasn't so much been about human drama and the details so much. But I don't know. And we're gonna get into this more when we get to the Love and Thunder review, but I'm just like, anything revolving around the MCU right now, I'm just like, it's hard for me to get excited about it. Especially with this. This is quite a ways down the road, I reckon. So 2-3 years away. Not really that pressed about it. This isn't a name that really gets me jumping out of my seat, but it's not, it's not nothing. It's not a nobody by any means. He's got talent and experience. So as you said, Comic-Con is a couple of weeks from this past weekend when we're recording this. So that'll be, it sounds like it's going to be a pretty big deal as far as Comic-Con goes for Marvel. And we know in 2019, they kind of pulled out all the stops. They announced Blade. They were talking about Blade. They revealed Love and Thunder as the title, and as Natalie Portman coming back as Jane. So that was a big deal, and I suspect that this will also be a pretty big deal. Maybe we'll get more information about Captain America 4. Maybe we'll also get some information about more about Blade or more about Ant-Man 3, since those are supposed to be around the corner. And then also you got to think about like bigger stuff down the road, like the Fantastic Four, X-Men, and even Secret Wars, which everyone thinks is kind of what everything is building toward, is like the next Infinity War style conflict. So there's a lot to think about. And also, just while we're talking about comic books and San Diego Comic-Con, DC is also returning for the first time. We know they did Fandom over the last couple of years of the pandemic, which was a huge success and very fun, and we kept up with that and had plenty of coverage on that. But it looks like they're returning to San Diego this year with Black Adam, which we know comes out in October, and then Shazam: Fury of the Gods, which comes out in December. So two pretty big projects. Those are the next two big DC films coming up. So that'll be a fun. I think we'll have plenty to talk about on the episode following that, which will be neat.
Sure. I know we're about to get into a lot of Marvel talk, but while we're on the topic of what's next in that future, I do think that like you're talking about bigger picture, that there needs to be some sort of roadmap, because I saw an interview that like Feige was saying like in the final stages of phase 4 we're really gonna start like the picture's gonna start coming together, and after Thor, which we'll get into, but everything has mainly been like Shang-Chi was very standalone, Eternals was standalone, Spider-Man obviously was a big crossover, Doctor Strange more of a crossover, but still not necessarily playing into something bigger. Thor very standalone still. So I know I've seen people talking on Twitter saying you're being too hard on phase 4 because you're comparing it to phase 3 being being like the culmination of the Infinity Saga, versus comparing phase 4 back to phase 1 when they were setting the stage, which is fair. But I do think there needs to be some sort of like, hey, this is where we're headed. This is why everything is coming together, because I'm like you, I'm like starting to lose steam a bit, and not necessarily, I feel like a lot of fans do want the big crossover. They want the overarching story rather than just the individual pieces.
And we're about to get into this even more. I mean, we're kind of segueing into this Love and Thunder review, but I tweeted this recently, yesterday or the day before, but I can't, there's so many reasons people want to throw out there as to why these movies these projects are being received less well, including, people want something like that converges or that explains like a bigger story or is leading towards something, which, because we were familiar with that. That's how the Infinity Saga went for 20 plus movies. And that's the valid point. However, a lot of times people just want to see a good movie that just has a good, fun, satisfying story in and of itself, and characters you care about, and good, well executed action, and some good humor, and maybe some romance thrown in there. Like at the end of the day, that's what we should want from these. And we can even look, and I had some examples, like look at the original Iron Man, look at The Winter Soldier, which is a fairly standalone and kind of isolated movie. You could say the first Guardians of the Galaxy, or Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which I know is a little bit more divisive, but I actually prefer it to the original. There's a number of items, Spider-Man Homecoming even, I guess you could say, as an example, like, which I still enjoy and I think might be the best Spider-Man of the MCU so far. Like, I do understand that complaint, but also if the movie itself is satisfying, you're not going to be thinking about how it necessarily connects to everything else, because you just want it to be enjoyable in the moment.
Right. And I mean, even Shang-Chi being a part of phase 4, like I enjoyed that. That has been my favorite, with the exception of No Way Home. That kind of counts as its own separate thing, I feel like.
Right.
But but Shang-Chi has been like my favorite outside of that within phase 4. And that was very standalone as well.
Yeah.
Completely new characters, completely new world, with the exception of Trevor. But that it was exactly what you're saying to me, as far as being like an entertaining story, and a good movie. So I agree with you there too, as far as like the overarching story goes, that it's not entirely necessary.
Yeah, and so as we're approaching film number 30 in this franchise, let's talk about Thor: Love and Thunder.
The 29th installment in the MCU, not counting TV shows, the 29th big screen installment, the 4th Thor movie. We had 1, we had 2, and then it kind of got that reboot after all of the Avengers stuff with Taika Waititi taking over. We've got Chris Hemsworth back as Thor, the God of Thunder. Natalie Portman is returning after a little time off in Ragnarok. Christian Bale as the villain, Gore the God Butcher. Tessa Thompson is back as Valkyrie, and Taika Waititi again behind the lens and voicing Korg, Thor's tag-along buddy here. So currently sitting at a 68% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, 81% audience score. I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was fun. I don't want it to seem like the overarching criticism that we were just having about phase 4. I don't want it to seem like I didn't like this movie, because I will criticize it, but I still went to this movie, had a good time. I gave it a 76 out of 100. It was a solid 3.5 stars for me. But as far as like coming off of Ragnarok and that being such a high, Ragnarok is my number 4 of the 29 movies. This came in relatively middle of the pack. It's 13 as far as my full rankings, but especially the excitement around the character of Thor being such a beloved character and coming back, like we said, with the phase 4 being most of this new stuff, to then return to a character who we all love after a movie that most people loved. I thought this was just like good and satisfactory versus being something that was like, oh, Ragnarok changed the game kind of. So I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it, but it wasn't like, it didn't like blow my socks off or anything.
Yeah. I hear that. Brother.
I know we're divisive. I don't know if divisive is the right word, but we are.
I mean, this is a fairly divisive movie. Like it's not doing like exceptionally well compared to the standard like the MCU has set as far as cinema score and audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, and even a critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, things like that. It's kind of towards the bottom of the barrel for the MCU, and it's unusual. But I think again, it's indicative of kind of where we are and where we're going with this franchise right now. Phase 4, just in general, to just hop up on my soapbox real quick, is like it just feels so sloppy and so like it's just not cohesive. And I'm not even talking about, like you said, overarching plan leading to something bigger. I'm talking about like cohesive within each project itself, whether it is one of those Disney Plus series, which I've mostly avoided, or these films, everything from Eternals, which was again kind of like a mediocre mess, to Multiverse of Madness, which I thought was like a mediocre mess, to this, which again, my feelings about this, my negative feelings, and I've been kind of going on about it on Twitter, is not so much toward this movie specifically, but it's more like just my feeling about the franchise, and also just the state of things like in the industry and with Marvel and
the
these
fact
movies.
that
it's a microcosm.
This is becoming the standard instead of the exception. Like,
yeah, that
I know a lot, like oftentimes in your tweets, when you are pointing these things out, the price tag is included in there, like this is a $200 million movie and it looks like this, or like and I totally agree with you there, like regardless of your like Marvel fandom, like for something that is like getting the bulk of the budget in Hollywood, like you should hold these things to high standards as far as how they look. Like, does it make sense? Like the like essential elements of a good movie. Like you can still go and have fun and like me, like I still went and enjoyed this movie and had fun with it, but that doesn't mean that there aren't still things that you can criticize and want better, because who doesn't want a better movie and the movies to be as good as they can be? If you just accept it, then it's going to continue to have like shoddy CGI or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's totally that is a big part of it. And so yes, so as far as my feelings about this movie specifically, I would probably say if we're talking about scoring it, I give it a 3.5, a 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I would say, yeah, it's like right middle of the road, like 50 to 60 out of 100. It's just not like anything like that I really enjoyed very much, unfortunately. Like it's just all very like by the numbers and like it just feels so half-hearted. Like there's nothing in this movie ever like had me like sitting forward in my seat or like sitting up in my seat or like really getting on the edge of it. Like I felt really nothing like toward it. It was just a big nothing like experience for me, which is a bummer because, again, as you're saying, these are the movies that are like helping power the industry. Compare my experience sitting in the theater watching this to my experience sitting and watching Top Gun Maverick in IMAX for like the third time, let alone the first time. It's like night and day. And those are characters mostly in that movie. That's a sequel to a movie that's like 30 years old. Don't really like care that much about. I was literally crying the first time I watched Top Gun Maverick. Like I was tearing up because of just the emotion that they were able to establish with some of those characters and the story in that movie. It's just like, why are we settling for this as far as the writing, the characters, like the way everything's established, the story, even the effects, like to some degree, as many people have pointed out at this point, just the look of the movie, which many times just looks like an SNL skit or like a parody movie, like a like not another superhero movie, like type parody. Like, so I do feel like negatively about it, but overall, the movie is what it is. There's some enjoyable things to admire. There's some laughs to be had. It's all like fairly good-hearted and not looking to do anything like mean-spirited necessarily or anything like that. So I mean, that's something you can say for it, but ultimately it just didn't leave an impact on me. And I just, other than why is this the way things are at the moment? And that's not a good sign, obviously. So yeah.
Well, let's lay the groundwork here. Let me give the quick synopsis here. Thor: Love and Thunder finds Thor on a journey unlike anything he's ever faced, a quest for inner peace, but his retirement is interrupted by a galactic killer known as Gore the God Butcher, who seeks the extinction of the gods. To combat the threat, Thor enlists the help of King Valkyrie, Korg, and ex-girlfriend Jane Foster, who, to Thor's surprise, inexplicably wields his magical hammer, Mjolnir, as the mighty Thor. Together, they embark upon a harrowing cosmic adventure to uncover the mystery of the God Butcher's vengeance and stop him before it's too late. So, a lot going on there, a lot of characters at play. But before we get into necessarily the what you did or didn't like about the plot, I feel like a lot of the discourse, the quote unquote discourse around this movie revolves around Taika Waititi. I feel like a lot of people online are just tired of him. I personally am not. Like I let's see, I'm trying to think. Loved Ragnarok. I like, he was too much in Free Guy. I've watched the show Our Flag Means Death on HBO Max, which he acts in and is the I guess the creator of that show.
Yeah.
And it's like, it was good, nothing great. But I was mixed on Jojo Rabbit, but like, I'm not like, I don't know. I feel like you were one of the people who is like over Taika, and I'm just curious, like, what is it that has, I feel like he was on top of the world like a year ago, 2 years ago. What is it in your mind that has like caused this change?
So, I mean, obviously the main thing. So, oh God, I feel like we're really getting to like a history lesson here. I'll just make this brief. So
I
he's this
didn't
guy.
mean to throw you off like this.
Oh no, I mean I'm totally. It's a great question. I mean, so he came from like indie filmmaking. He came from
Right.
very small, intimate, fun films like What We Do in the Shadows, which is one of my favorite comedies of all time.
Mhm.
He did The Hunt for the Wilder People, which is again a small like New Zealand-based production. Boy, I believe, is another film that may have come even prior to either of those. And then he got this gig with the MCU. Obviously, he's just another up and coming young, somewhat pliable filmmaker that the MCU loves to go after, that they can have at the helm of these things. And he was brought in to like kind of kindle some sort of spark within the Thor franchise, because the first couple were two of the lower end films in the franchise. And I think everyone, myself included, or most people, myself included, really quite enjoyed and liked the change of pace and tone that we saw in Thor Ragnarok. So that's also, I'd say that's like close, if not in my top 10, just right around my top 10 of the MCU movies, which is a pretty big, it's pretty high up there considering there's almost 30 films now. And then, so, I did enjoy that a lot. But then what happens is he goes and does Jojo Rabbit, which again, I fell asleep trying to watch the movie at the film festival. And we may have not told that story before, but that did happen. So I cannot speak to the quality of the movie. I did fall asleep though. And I missed it. And then, but there was kind of not controversy around the movie, but there were people that took a kind of offense to it or did not like the satirical way he was going about that story, given like the subject matter, which is totally fine. Everyone has their opinion. So that I think got him on people were feeling a little bit type of way about that in minority, groups. And then he does, he's coming back and he's hired on to do the next Thor movie. And he has all these other projects. He's doing this show, Reservation Dogs on FX, and he's doing What We Do in the Shadows for FX as well. So he's making all this money. He has all these different projects ongoing. And he's always signing on to new projects as well. So like the Inkle is something that he's doing, a Jodorowsky related project. And then he was attached to Akira, which I mentioned, and I had a tweet kind of pop off about where he was going to do a live action Akira for WB. And actually it was Warner had to kind of put that on a shelf because he signed on to do Thor 4. And I just said, well, given kind of what we've seen as far as his visual style and his tone and everything, I don't know if he's necessarily right for Akira. And I think that this movie Love and Thunder just kind of solidifies that, because what we see here is just such a loose, kind of haphazard, as I said on Twitter, ramshackle kind of approach to filmmaking. And there's this Vanity Fair breakdown or like scene analysis that he just did that is starting to also gain traction. And also it's the way he talks in the press as well. Like I think that is another thing, like just his personality, the way he is he definitely gives off energy. Like he is one of those guys that he is so hot right now that he doesn't want to take anything seriously, and he's just going to do kind of whatever he wants. And like, you just have to kind of roll with it. I think his character in Free Guy, that's just such a random, like tangential thing, but he was like so annoying and grating in that movie.
He was annoying in that.
It's how he comes across like in his interviews and like in his, when we see him like in real life. Which I'm sure, like, I don't know him and I can't speak to like how he is. People seem to like working with him, so that's good. But like this video just recently, like I said, he's talking about this scene, this very simple scene that they showed from the movie, and it's Valkyrie, Thor, Korg, and Jane talking inside a room about the plot essentially, and Gore, and how they're going to try to figure out how to beat him. And the scene lasts just a few minutes, and again, it's just dialogue essentially. And he says, he's talking about how bad the CG looks and how it doesn't look real and that the editing is messed up. And he talks about how they had to film it 3 separate occasions over the course of a year because they were still writing the movie in post-production. And it's just like, okay, so you're like crapping on the VFX artists who are probably like not paid well enough and are crammed and like crunched with work. And then you also are like, the editing like was not done well apparently, which you're like largely responsible for. And then he's also making fun of like the fact that they were writing it, like completely changing stuff on the fly. And I get that he likes to improvise and he likes to like, then that's probably a thing that people liked about Ragnarok, but it feels like off the success of Ragnarok. And he even says this in the video, and Tessa Thompson, who's also in the video, is kind of attesting to it. But he just says, well, Ragnarok was such a success and people liked it so much. And I just was thinking to myself, like, how can we top this? Like, there's no way we can top it. So what do we do? And it just seems like they were like, let's try to take it like as least seriously as possible and like put in like less effort here and there, and let's just improvise and like make things up as we go along, because they were like, oh well, we can't top Ragnarok, so let's just do something that's goofy and that kind of is in the same vein of Ragnarok, and hopefully people will like dig it. And I feel like it's just like the opposite. It's like, well, people, you hear these other filmmakers talk, you hear Matt Reeves talk in depth about the Batman, and you hear James Gunn, the way he talks about the movies he does, comic movies, and Denis Villeneuve talking about Dune, and these big budget like filmmakers, and you hear how much thought and like intricacies and detail and planning that they do that goes into these movies, and that's why they look so good, or why they're so enjoyable, or like why the writing works. And in this, it just feels like the antithesis of that in so many ways, even though I did enjoy Ragnarok a lot. And I do think that was a fun detour and was a fresh thing at the time. I feel like this is like, if you took Ragnarok and you had it in a fridge as leftovers for 5 years and then threw it in the microwave and then tried to eat it, that's basically what you're getting with Love and Thunder.
I think that's very informative. I appreciate the insight. But I do think, I think that's a good segue into just like this movie as a whole. How does it compare to Ragnarok? Because I like your microwave, your leftovers metaphor there. I feel like it is a lot of the same formula. It's got the rock and roll music, the bright colors, the silliness, the levity, the like dude bro humor sort of. It's just like all cranked up to an even higher degree than it was in Ragnarok. And some of that works, some of it doesn't. You know, they've got 4 different Guns N' Roses like needle drops in this. The absurdity of it to some extent. Like, I for one like really enjoyed Russell Crowe's character of Zeus that was just like so silly. But then some of the other stuff, like the humor, like you said, there are some laughs, but sometimes it can be a bit too much because it's just like nothing has time to breathe because it's just constantly followed by another zinger, another punchline. And they're not necessarily like witty punchlines or anything. It's just like I said, dude bro humor. And again, like I would definitely like laugh. Dude bro humor works on me a good bit, so like I laughed sometimes, but like there were times where it was like, okay, this is too much, like we can tone it down a little bit.
No, I hear that, and I certainly agree to maybe even a larger extent, but like just using an example, so the movie starts out and it starts with gore, and you have this it's a very sad kind of it's played to be very sad and somber. He's out here in the desert and he's dying, and his daughter is dying, and it's a very interesting opening. I quite liked it. I wasn't expecting it, and it comes before the Marvel Studios logo pops up, so it's a very different tone. It just kind of hits you, and I liked that. And then you see Christian Bale. He's obviously putting in his work. He's doing a good job as usual, it almost gave me a feeling, because maybe it's just because of the desert, but like the first thing that came to mind was I was thinking about like Star Wars, and and he's an alien, of course, and he has like these designs on his face and whatnot, and his skin's all like blistered and whatnot, and I was just thinking, I'm thinking about like what Taika's like Star Wars could look like, or what he could do with the story or characters in that. So it's all very somber, and
I hope his Star Wars isn't set on Tatooine like everything else in the Star Wars universe.
I never want to see desert in Star Wars ever again. But
also, wait, quick side note while we're talking Taika Star Wars. Did you see the interview that was like, he reached out, like obviously Natalie Portman is in this movie, and he asked her, like they worked so well together that he asked her like, have you ever wanted to do a Star Wars movie? And she was like, I was in 3 of them already. And he was like, oh, you were? I forgot about those. So I feel like that could kind of play into your persona of Taika that he gives off. That
like even like, I mean, he's probably, I mean, I would have to assume or hope that he was joking when he said that, but just like the fact that like it's just like obviously Natalie Portman, like that the prequels are what they are. Like, why are you even like joking about that anymore? But anyway, so it starts out like that, and then So it's all very sad and somber. And then he sees an oasis, and you think, like, is this a mirage? Like, what's going on here? And he goes into it, and he's in the water, and he's in like this set that is like this, like, you got some plastic grass over here, and then this water, and this all of a sudden you see these gods that are just sitting there. And it's so jarring, first off, seeing them, and they look so goofy, and then they start talking. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is like straight out of like a mid 2000s like parody movie. Like this is literally like epic movie. And they start talking, they're like making fun of him and laughing, like this crazy accent. And and Christian Bale, like he's doing his darndest. Like, don't get me wrong, he's going toe to toe with them. He's like, but you know, we pray to you and we honor you. Like, how can you do this? And then they're just like laughing in his face. And it's just such a jarring, like the tones do not go together. Like, I get what you're going for. I get the contrast. Like the gods are so above normal beings, like they just don't care and they have no respect for them. But like, I feel like there's a way you could do it that would still maybe get the point across, and maybe there would even be some humor in it. But like to just have it work the way it does and the way it looks, like with the effects, and like he's supposed to be so much bigger than Gore, and he like kneels down and he's like picking him up. It's just like, what the hell's going on here? And then of course there's like, oh, and then the god's like, oh, we just killed this guy and he has this corrupt black necro sword. Don't you know, that can do whatever the fuck it can do. And then they go ahead and he is trying to kill Gore and he's choking him, which I guess gods, that's all they have, is the ability to kill people, is just choking them by the throat. But as he's choking him, Gore, the sword like comes up to him and he like kills him with it. He like puts this through his head, and there's gold blood. And I guess all the gods have gold blood in this movie. Gotta keeping it PG-13, of course. And then he's like, and it's like corrupting him, I guess, is what we're supposed to take from it, because he's turning like black and like he looks evil. His eyes are turning colors, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna make this vow, I'm gonna go kill all the gods. Mind you, this is the only god we actually see him kill on screen in the entire 2 hours, and this is 5 minutes into the movie. So that's how it starts, and like that just did not set like a good. I will say that's not like, it does get better in some parts. Like I did enjoy other parts much more than that opening, but like it starts like that, and it just, to me, it just did not really ever get out of that awkward, jarring feeling that I got in a lot of the other moments.
I don't remember having a reaction like that. Like I was not, thrown off by that opening as much as it sounds like you were. But I do want to talk, we can use this to transition into just Gore as a whole, this character, because there's a lot to like and a lot to dislike. It's interesting. For me, Christian Bale was eating this performance. He was snapping. I don't know if you felt the same way. But he was just kind of out there going crazy, and it was kind of like the way that he was like maniacal almost, of like, though he was like, obviously not to the extent of like a Heath Ledger Joker, but like the way that he's like laughing at himself and like very crazy, but like in the cage with the kids, he's like teasing them and telling them jokes and stuff, but it's like in a scary way. Like I thought he was genuinely creepy and scary, and that he looked cool as well. Like I know people had compared the comic look to Voldemort, but the wounds that he had and the stitches and like scars, I thought that was very cool. But the character itself, like not the performance of it, but like you said, that his daughter dies and he finds out that the gods like don't really care about him, and so that's all we know of to be the motivation for why he wants to kill all of the gods in the world,
in the universe,
universe. So it's like, I don't even know if it was almost like his daughter dying and then like his like betrayal from the gods were like separate. Like it was separate things that happened at the same time. Like his betrayal of the gods did not necessarily like lead to his daughter dying, unless he just like he prayed to them and they didn't answer. But it just was not like some of the villains. Some of the villains that we have gotten in the MCU do have like this compelling background that justifies and motivates them. Like Loki, even like Loki, Thanos, Vulture, even like some of the better villains that we've gotten in these movies. But this was just a very, like you said, in the first 5 minutes, and suddenly, like, next thing we hear of him, he's like off killing all of the gods and like rampaging through the universe. It was just, for me, it wasn't like I liked the character, the look, the feel, what he did, the performance, but the motivation of it all was just not all there. And also he was not in this a ton. I wish we had, like, when he was on screen, again, Christian Bale eating, but I wish we'd had more of him in this movie.
No, you make a lot of great points, and I definitely want to add on to that. So I'm in agreement with you. I do think Bale, I mean, the guy, he's just not a bad actor, is he? He takes what he's given, he does what he can, and he eats and when you say eat, I mean, he's eating the scenery in this movie, and I mean that obviously in the figurative sense, because he's on a different kind of wavelength compared to everyone else. Like he is being genuinely creepy and scary with the way he speaks and the way he moves his body. He's a very, he's a physical actor, and that's on screen in this. I'm not a filmmaker, and I'm not going to try to completely remake this movie, obviously, but I'm just thinking, we're talking about the motivation for gore, and we're talking about establishing that character, and not only that character, but his daughter. And not only those two individuals, but also their belief system, or like their devotion to their gods, let's say. And the way this movie starts, I said I liked how it kind of just starts with them, and it goes into this very grim situation. But the movie, and I said this on Twitter as well when I was critiquing it, it's 2 hours long. Imagine if we just got another 10 or 15 minutes of movie, and that some of that was devoted to gore and his daughter and his motivation. Like, let's say instead of the movie opening with them just sitting in the middle of the desert for whatever reason and dying, what if it starts they're on their home planet, this world, let's say it is a desert planet, but they're in their home, and there's like religious items like throughout. They have, maybe there's candles, and they're like praying, and they're like in the middle of like a worshiping or a ceremony or something. And you see like how devout they are. And there's this 5 minutes of them acting like father and daughter, and like they're being cute, and like they're having a great relationship back and forth. And then like a storm comes by, or like just something knocks them out and puts them in a situation where they have to really, they're on their own. And if they don't get saved, or if they don't get some sort of relief from the gods, they're not going to make it. And then we get to the point where they're sitting in the desert with nothing. And then she dies, and he runs into the gods. And now you understand, okay, wow, okay, I care about these characters because I just saw them how they, work together in their relationship. And then I also see how devout they are. And this is just like, it throws you into this situation. You don't even understand, what are they doing in the desert? Like, what happened to get them to this point? It just shows them suffering, and like, there's no civilization around. There's no food, no water. I mean, it's inexplicable to me. Like, these are just like basic things that you would think would establish the foundation of the character and his motivation, and would make you care more, not only about him and what he's doing in the movie, but his daughter, because she comes back into play, which is something that we'll get to. But like, I just don't understand, like, that opening for me. It's just, again, it kind of encompasses my other issues as far as developing and like putting thought and effort into how you're going to establish a character and how you're going to develop him and his motivation and things like that. And these are all things, motivation, the villain, that Taika said in that video that I mentioned earlier, where he said, oh, well, we had to really kind of help like explain that, or like try to like flesh that out some more, essentially. And I'm like, well, if you had just written the movie when you're supposed to, or like really put that extra scene or two in there, like, I feel like I would have been fine with another 10 or 15 minutes of movie to get to something that I actually care about.
Especially because this was only just over 2 hours, as far as these big Marvel movies go. Yeah. We've been trained to expect like 2.5 or more.
I mean, No Way Home was like 45 minutes longer than this movie. Like, like that's pretty nuts. Like, I just don't get that.
Well, I'm totally with you there. I do. First of all, that answers a lot of my stuff, because I had said I wanted more gore, and I also wanted to fix his motivation. So I'm with you. Get Johnny on the payroll to help rewrite this movie. But going into just like the movie as a whole, I guess I know we've talked about gore a lot, but the movie's not called Gore, Love and Thunder. It's Thor. We've got Thor. We've got Jane coming back. This storyline where, you know, the basically Thor is off world with the Guardians of the Galaxy. They have a little cameo at the start for an adventure and then jet off and do their own thing. So it was a nice nod. I know people had been curious about how, if this was going to be like a half and half. We learned later, but early on when this movie, you know, after the end of Endgame, when everybody's together, it's like, okay, are they all together? Is this going to be a half and half movie or not? But they had their nice little exit, and we got down to business with Thor. But Jane being back on Earth, she has cancer, and as a result hears Mjolnir call out to her and basically wields the hammer that was shattered at the end of, or during Ragnarok, but wields that, and it kind of preserves her life. I was kind of confused by that because it like gives her the powers of Thor and preserves her life with this new strength, but at the same time we hear that it is like each time she uses the hammer it drains her life.
So I guess so to try to explain
any clarity there.
Try to explain that a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of things in this movie that I definitely can't explain, or maybe you could do it for me, but this is something where, and this is based on a comic run, and I believe it's the same reasoning, but when she wields Mjolnir, she becomes Thor, transforms, it basically it increases her health, right? But I guess the logic is that it increases her and makes her like healthy as Thor when she's transformed, but because it's making her healthy, it like purges like the chemotherapy or like the treatment from her system, so that when she goes back to being a human, she's like getting worse, or like it's not like cancer spreading or something to that effect.
Okay, that makes sense. Makes more sense now.
More sense.
But overall, I mean, this story incorporating Jane, having the two Thors, seeing this sort of like very like rom-com style relationship between them as they both have these feelings for each other, haven't figured out how to work it out. I know you had noted that there was not much chemistry between them. There never had been. But I kind of liked this version of Thor that was like, you know, he is this like mighty, all-powerful god, and we've seen him kick ass and enter Wakanda in a storm and like just absolutely shred people apart. But then like the fact that we see him now as like this insecure little boy trying to figure out his romance. I liked that element of the movie, and just kind of like the awkwardness between them. But what were your thoughts on the overall Thor Jane storyline?
So this is, again, between Gore and Jane, I really think, again, that 15 or so minutes could have really benefited the movie overall, because I think Gore could have gotten more motivation. I think Jane, I wish there had been, I'm not even sure, because as I said this on Letterboxd, basically the first moments we get with Jane, she's sitting in chemotherapy, and there's a guy next to her in the facility at the clinic, and he's reading a book that she's written. She's a scientist. So all this scene is used to do this interaction with this guy, because he's there for about 2 minutes, and she explains like a wormhole, how it works. And so in this 2 minutes, what we're supposed to remember is that Jane was in these other movies and that she's a scientist and a genius, and that she dated Thor, and we haven't seen her in 10 years, literally. So that leads into the scene then where she is talking to, what the hell's her name? She was in WandaVision. Darcy. And they're just talking about, okay, I have cancer, etc. And it's a very awkward, it felt like a very, like, again, haphazard, barely conceived. And she even, the wormhole thing she does to explain the wormhole, which I'm not really told, she's explaining her own theory, I guess, but it's a theory that we've seen in other movies, like that she mentions, like Event Horizon and Interstellar. And she just does that again. So, and she's like, oh, go watch those movies. And, I just don't really know. All we get from this is that, okay, she has cancer, and we're just reminded of other things that we should already know, basically. Because people are just, they don't expect people to know or remember or care about that from 10 years ago. And so then we see her, she's doing more research, and then she's getting called by Mjolnir. So she has these books about Vikings or Norse, and she's reading about Mjolnir. And it's like in 5 minutes, basically, we are reintroduced to her. We hear about her past experience, and we also hear about her cancer. And then she goes and gets Mjolnir, essentially, like in that span of time. Again, just felt very awkward. It felt kind of like lazy in some regards. I think someone mentioned this on Twitter, and now I can't get it out of my head, and I can't remember who it was, but how much more interesting and kind of exciting or and maybe impactful or shocking it would have been in some regards if we got our first introduction to Jane in this movie. Was we don't see her at all, and Thor's doing his thing, and then he gets called back to go after Gore in the village. And then Mjolnir shows up, and we're like, oh, wow, it's Mjolnir. Like, what the hell is going on here? And then she catches the hammer, and we're like, and he's like, Jane? And we're like, wait, Jane? Or maybe some people will be like, oh, who's Jane? Like, I don't remember Jane. And then they do flashbacks anyway during this time, because then they have to remind us, oh, they dated and that they had a falling out. And Korg's like telling this whole story.
I did like Korg as the narrator. I don't know about you. I thought that was funny because I love Korg.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever. It's like neither here nor there as far as the Korg stuff goes. But like, it would have been, I think there could have been more narrative, like suspense or like tension through that, or intrigue, if our introduction was, oh wow, she's like Thor now, like what is going on, like who is this, or what is Jane doing? And then we find out, oh well, they, Korg explains, well, they broke up, they had this relationship, and then ... she gets cancer, and like she tells Thor, like, I was called by Mjolnir. And the issue with this in the script itself is that the reason she gets called to Mjolnir, or the way that Mjolnir is taking care of her or healing her, is because Thor like whispered to Mjolnir like years ago that if anything happens to him, like Mjolnir needs to protect Jane. So I guess there's like this rune that appears on the hammer that we had never like seen before, that just like is supposed to, I guess it calls to her because it knows she's sick, or like that she's dying. And so that's it. So it's all like, all of this stuff that we're trying to keep up with is so reverse engineered into their backstory, into these little background details. It just, I don't know. It just felt very like lazy and very like just convenience after convenience, like things that they were throwing in to explain how we got to this point and how is this movie going to work now. And the thing with the hammer and like Stormbreaker, like, oh my God, so many times they went back to this well of like this love triangle between Thor and his two weapons. And when they, like, multiple times when they could have been spending those minutes like developing Jane or developing Gore, because you're cramming two like pretty famous and like popular stories from the comics of Mighty Thor with Jane and Gore the God Butcher, and we're like getting like half service on both of them. So it's just, that's for me, like that's what kind of fails this movie the most, is those two things not getting like the attention or like the time necessarily in the script, in the editing, whatever you want to say, none of it feels like satisfactory, like it doesn't really add up to me, like as far as the emotion behind it or the logic behind it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Did you, I guess, was it charming? Like, with all that being said, the motivation, the background, was that like a complete no-go for like the remainder of the movie? I'm trying to, like, did the lack of motivation or not having enough background ruin it? Or was it, were you still able to find some enjoyment in seeing the two Thors team up and seeing their like back and forth kind of will they, won't they romance, or no?
Yeah, no, I didn't care really about any of that. Like,
it's okay. That's
seeing them quote unquote team up. I mean, they fight alongside each other, or they fight the same person, like in the same scene, but they never really work together necessarily, or like work in like a really cohesive, like in Infinity War, Endgame, or any of the other Avengers movies, for example. Like they do those really cool like combos or like power moves, like you would say, like in a video game or something, where they're like hitting off each other's like weapons, or they're like doing, you know, throwing guys between each other. We don't really see that necessarily in this. And also, as far as that's the action side of it. As far as the romance, like, you know, will they, won't they? I always figured they would. Like, you know, the reasoning behind them like not being together, like it's very flimsy, right? Like it's just like, oh well, I want to be a scientist and you want to be Thor. Like, okay, like, you know, there's not. It's very flat as far as the reasoning for why they separate. And then when they finally get back together and kiss, like it's an hour and a half into the movie and they're gonna kiss for the first time. Like it's such a like it's like a middle school kiss. Like it's so, to me there's
show him some passion, Johnny.
There's no passion. There's no heat. There's nothing, like for a movie called Love and Thunder. There's no and this is again something I mentioned that was lacking in the first two movies, and why they got rid of Jane to begin with, and why Natalie Portman wanted nothing to do with these movies anymore, is they didn't write her in an interesting way. They didn't write the relationship in an interesting way. So the chemistry was lacking. And even in this, when they have more fun stuff to talk about or do together, again, it's cute. It's cutesy, as I said. And we get to see those back and forth like banter, but the actual relationship, like the Catwoman and Batman stuff we got in the Batman was way more interesting and compelling. And like, there was more passion and like electricity between those two in like an hour or an hour and a half than we got in 3 movies with these two characters. And that to me, again, that's just disappointing. And that's like, when you're making your whole movie about that makes it hard for me to like really be invested or like to find it compelling is like a main plot point.
Yeah, I can see that. I totally get where you're coming from. For the sake of time here, I know we've spent a good bit on this last story piece. I would like to touch on where this leaves us, where this movie leaves us with the not redemption, but basically the final stage here is that there is this, at the center of the universe, there is eternity, which is this being that can grant whoever gets to it first whatever wish they want. So Gore needs Stormbreaker, the axe, to open up the Bifrost. Listen, I feel like I'm starting Dune with all this terminology. To open up the Bifrost, it's the key to opening up the pathway to the center of the universe so that he can get to eternity and make his wish, which would be to kill all of the gods at once. So basically we get to this point and Gore is there, but so is Thor, so is Jane. Jane has been wiped of her Thor powers and is dying in Thor's arms. Basically, Thor gives him this speech in which he's telling him that he doesn't have love. Basically, that's what it boils down to. As Thor,
cliche, I gotta
Thor
say.
is basically telling him, like, you got here, it's your chance. Like, you have the opportunity to make your wish and kill all the gods if you want, but it's not going to mean anything or whatever. You don't have love, blah, blah, blah. And so basically Gore has this change of heart. He like sees his daughter, has this change of heart, and instead chooses love and uses his wish to bring her back, even though he's dying. So he dies, Jane dies, and where it leaves us is that Thor has a daughter now. Thor agrees to take care of Gore's daughter. So the little girl from the beginning is back alive, and we get her living in New Asgard with Thor, and that she's like this sassy little girl, like basically just modernized, you know, this from wherever she was, whenever she was. Now she's like, an iPad kid in 2023. But basically that's the title of the movie, Love and Thunder. She is love, Thor is thunder.
Plot twist.
And so the when the title card drops as the credits roll, but so basically what we're left with as the, not the post credits or mid credits, but like the closing of the film, is that Gore or Thor is training her to become. She's wielding the axe, he's back with the hammer. And they're just training her to be, I don't know, like, is this girl gonna be around? I imagine that she has to be in some capacity. But I don't think we didn't see much of her, so I don't know if she's like a talent that can be in, I don't know, the Young Avengers or some future project, or is it just like are we just going to conveniently forget about that in a couple movies?
I mean, so you know that's Chris Hemsworth's daughter, right?
Oh, I did not know that whatsoever.
Yeah, so his entire family is in this movie essentially. You have his brother playing.
I know the third brother plays one of the actors, which again I loved. That was very nice that they brought that back because that was one of the highlight scenes of Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Was that Ragnarok? Which one was that?
It was Ragnarok, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was one of the highlights.
And then you have his wife is the wolf lady he's making out with on the wolf.
Okay.
And then his two other children, one of them plays young Thor in the montage when he's running through the trees.
Okay.
And then his third child is one of just the random Asgardian kids that's in there.
Gotcha. But no love for Liam Hemsworth.
So Taika Waititi and Hemsworth are using this movie to get all their family members on payroll. But anyway, the interesting thing about that is, yeah, we don't care about her, Gore's daughter. Honestly, everything that happened in that, like, it was like, you know, when they get snapped and they're in like the watery place, like it was kind of like that, wasn't it? Like when Thanos.
Oh yeah. When Gamora and Thanos are there.
Yeah,
like
it was kind of like that, which was weird. And then I was like, wow, they're really just going back to that visual thing, huh? And then everything that happened in that scene where Thor's with holding Jane and Gore is there and like they're talking like back and forth and like he kind of sounds like Batman because his voice is really low and growly. I was like, I honest to God, I couldn't like follow what the hell they were doing or like what was gonna happen. And then all of a sudden they're both dead. And then he has the daughter. And I'm just like, well, what? Like, where did this come from? I mean, he's never once expressed interest in having children, having a daughter, wanting to have kids, even necessarily with like Jane. I mean, in this movie, Korg and Valkyrie mention in a separate scene, separate from Thor, where Thor's not around to hear it, Jane's not around to hear it either. They talk about like, oh, he'd be a good dad, etc. And but that's like the only inkling or seed that could possibly be related to this. And so all of a sudden he's like, I'm a dad and we're going to go train and, all these other things. It's just like, and then that's how the movie ends. Yeah. It's like Love and Thunder is actually, it's Thor and his adoptive daughter of Gore, the God Butcher, who we never got to hear like speak dialogue until now. I'm just like, damn, that was not good. that was when it hit me. I was like, this was not good. I was like, I have no idea. This is just completely baffling how we got to this point based on everything else that's happened in the movies so far, and also everything we've seen from Thor in the last like 8 movies he's been in. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not keen on that whole situation. I mean, either they have Hemsworth's daughter play this kid Thor that he's gonna just carry around with the rest of every movie he plays Thor now, I guess. I don't know how many movies he has left potentially. I mean, maybe 1 or 2.
He's talked about wanting to do more.
Yeah, so I think there's definitely more in the cards. I just don't know if that means that he's gonna have his daughter like on set and like in all of his scenes like as a major piece going forward, or if they're gonna like age her up, like go forward a few years and like not keep the same girl and just have it like an actual like trained actor, or like child actor in the play. Or I mean, that seems to be like I don't see a way that the next time we see Thor, like he doesn't have that kid with him. Like it seems like it's all riding on that now. And like I just think that that's so baffling and like not at all. It's not only not what I expected or not what I want, but it just doesn't feel true or logical based on everything else that we've seen. So that's my biggest like annoying like element about that, I would say.
Yeah. I'm very shook right now because after you said that, I went to the cast list and I was looking at it all. And I looked up, so Hemsworth's wife, Elsa Pataki, I don't know how to say her last name, Pataki. But she is Elena in the Fast and the Furious movies.
Yes, that's true.
Which is the lover of Vin Diesel. So a little MCU loves triangle going on there. So, or one of the lovers, Vin Diesel has many lovers.
Yeah.
So interesting. I had no idea they've been married since 2010.
Yeah. Long haul.
But yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen. I imagine that they can't, like you said, they can't just drop this daughter, this character, but we'll see. We'll talk quickly about the post credits before we wrap up. I don't care about the post credits. Jane arriving in Valhalla, meeting Heimdall. I guess that means that it was nice to see them, but hopefully that means they're officially dead. But the mid credits, the big boy here is my king, Brett Goldstein as Hercules. Roy Kent himself entering the MCU. There had been long rumors that a Ted Lasso cast member was joining the MCU. So I was kind of just by assumption thinking it was going to be Sudeikis. Unfortunately, I had this spoiled for me beforehand. I saw it online, but it was nice. Rebecca had no idea whatsoever, so I got to live vicariously through her reaction, which was great. But now we have Danny Rojas, Cristo Fernandez in the post credits with Venom of the post credits of No Way Home. He's the bartender, and we've got Roy Kent here. So we're building a little Ted Lasso MCU crossover universe here. But as far as what this means, though, Hercules is the son of Zeus. We think that Thor kills Zeus, but instead at the end, he took a lightning bolt through the heart but survived, and he's going on about how the people used to worship the gods, and now they're just obsessed with the superheroes who are nowhere near as good as the gods. So he wants his son Hercules to avenge him and to kill Thor. So I know that in the comics, Thor and Hercules were rivals before eventually teaming up. So I don't know if that's the route they're going to go here, but I'm happy for Brett. I'm happy for my guy securing the bag, getting the MCU cash. He's obviously a huge star in Ted Lasso. He's got another show coming at Apple that he is starring in and creating with Jason Segel and Bill Lawrence, who is the showrunner for Ted Lasso. And then I think another show as well. So he's going to be busy. I would definitely rather see him in those other things. I hope the MCU doesn't take up too much of his time, but I'm also, it's just going to be weird to see him. I can't imagine him not having, I know you're not a Ted Lasso guy, but not having him like be his Roy Kent, like, I'm Roy Kent, like that kind of like gruff British voice. I don't know if that's what he's going to say. All we heard him say was, "Yes, father," which like sounded sort of like Roy Kent. So maybe they are just going to go with that, but we'll see. I was excited for that, even if I didn't know it was coming. But any thoughts for you on the actor, the character, what it means, anything?
Nah, I have no ties or real interest in like Hercules. I don't know anything about him as a character, and also obviously not a Ted Lasso watcher as of yet, so no feelings about the actor. But I mean, it's interesting. I'm glad he went ahead and got that bag, and I think that that'll be fun to see like going forward. But otherwise, no, not really. I mean, I would say that I think the thing with Zeus at the end was very strange. Like, I guess he's alive now. I don't think we'll see Russell Crowe again, most likely, but I just thought that was interesting that they very clearly killed him earlier in the movie, and then they're like,
yeah,
he's just got a hole in his chest. He's good. And that, speaking of which, they also killed Korg and brought him back. Basically seconds.
Rebecca's jaw dropped when Korg died.
Yeah, no, they very much made him seem like he was donezo. And then also Valkyrie got mortally stabbed by Gore, and then they were like, "Nah, I'm good, bro." But I mean, she was out of commission, but she was totally fine, basically. So that's another thing that just kills me that the MCU continues to do. But and then also Jane in Valhalla with Heimdall. I assume that's the end for her, right? Like Valhalla is not someplace you can go unless you die, it seems.
Yeah, like. I would think.
So I would hope that that's the closing of the door on that. But hey, maybe we'll have the new Disney Plus series Valhalla starring Natalie Portman, Idris Elba. They'll milk another 6 episodes out of that, but I don't know. Yeah, the ending, these 2 scenes, like when they did the Hercules thing, like my group that I was with, my family, they just looked over at me with like they were just utterly puzzled, like what or who was that? But yeah, we'll see. I really have no idea where Thor goes from here or any of these characters really. So I think that's maybe a good thing, or also who cares, I guess. But we'll find out in years from now, presumably.
That we will. But there you have it. Thor, Love and Thunder, full review, another episode in the books. Thank you all for tuning in week and week out. We could not do it without your support.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much once again for listening. And please, to keep up with us and keep the chain trucking along, follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, give us a like on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. You can keep up with all the podcast episodes there, as well as some great interviews that Zach has going on and other content. And those accounts can all be found at Inside Film Room.
And be sure to subscribe to our newsletter, The Rewind, while you are at it, so you can get everything delivered straight to your inbox. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. And in the meantime, we will be off next week as I celebrate my marriage. Johnny will be there. I don't know if he'll do a live podcast from the reception. We'll see. And then I am jetting off on my honeymoon. So it might be a minute till we talk again, but we'll see. We'll see whenever that is. And we'll see you then.
And he'll be married.